This computer. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our mini episode. So it's officially been a year since we started For the World. So we thought it would be a good idea to have a mini podcast episode just talking about what we enjoy about the club, what we might do later on in the future, and just a few of our favorite things. So first of all, my first question for everybody here is what was your favorite meeting or event that we've had so far?
I can start. Personally, I really loved when we went to the library and we made cards for kids with, or I think it was kids in hospitals. I thought that it was like a great bonding experience with like all the people in For the World and being able to like do something so meaningful and like it was also very whimsical because we were able to like make fun cards and I don't know, overall it was like a really great time.
My favorite memory was probably the podcast episode that we recorded about overall just like women empowerment, I believe was what we were focusing on, and like feminism in that specific episode. And we kind of brought up examples from a lot of like modern like pop culture references. So like we had Divergent mentioned in there and like some other really fun ones. So I think it was a great way to incorporate like parts of our lives that I guess are so prominent with something that's like a good cause.
I think that my favorite like event that we did was just like us making like those like what is it? Recycling, upcycling like things and like those like videos that we could like share on YouTube to like let everyone like see how to make stuff because it's like it kind of like makes you kind of like think outside the box of like how you can like repurpose stuff so that it like even after like its intended use is over, you can still like make something of your own and like make value to it.
I liked when we sold cookies because I just like walking around and eating them.
A rat. Okay, I think I would agree with Sabi. I think my favorite one was definitely when we went to the library and made cards because like why is my favorite? I think it was just a really fun experience, like oh decorating the cards, but also writing really cute messages, knowing that it's gonna go to like kids who look forward to something like that. So that was definitely my favorite. For if I had to choose a podcast episode, um, I think the one we did last week, or maybe it wasn't last week, but the most recent one we did was my favorite because I think towards the end we were really casual with it and we said some funny things. I think that was the most funny podcast episode. But other than that, um, so since For the World is based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, if I had to choose a favorite, I think I think it would be climate action, which is number 13, just because that's kind of like I mean, they're all the future, but climate action is like encompasses almost everything. And I think there's so many different things you could do to help climate action. So one thing, we recently went to the library and the organization we were watching, they would host like beach cleanups. And I thought that was a really good idea just to go out on a beach and clean up a bunch of plastic. And the lady we were listening to, she's like, oh, there's so many small pieces of plastic that you wouldn't notice anyways. And so a good way to volunteer towards climate action, I think, would be to go to the beach and just pick up plastic. Because I think if you're doing it with friends or people you like, it might be something fun. And again, we're always trying to make volunteering fun and exciting. So I think beach cleanup would be really good if you're trying to look for something towards climate action.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I remember that meeting at the library mainly because I brought a plastic water bottle with me that day, which was like the first time and the only time I ever brought a plastic bottle with me anywhere. And she was like, "Oh, this takes 44 like 100 years to decompose." And I was like, "Oh my God." And I like tried to hide it after that, but like it was no use. I could feel the death stares. But for me personally, my favorite UN goal is probably number 4, quality education. And I think there are a lot of great ways to volunteer and participate in this goal. Namely, a lot of them are like volunteering at local like places for tutoring, going to the city and helping tutor. But also I feel like it's important to know that you don't really have to like join an organization. You can also like if there's something you really know that you're good at, and there's a bunch of like free resources online, like textbooks and stuff, and really all people need is like someone to guide them. So if you feel that like you can do that just within your community itself, you'd be helping a lot of people. But yeah, there's a lot of definitely a lot of great ways to like volunteer and do outreach, especially in like bigger cities where you can help tutor others.
I think my favorite goal for of the UN goals is the zero hunger, which is goal 2. And I think that mainly it's just because like it's kind of like the basis of like everything because like you need to like eat to survive and you need to kind of like live to do everything you want to do. And so I think that especially like with this, it's like it applies to like everyone basically because everyone's human, everyone needs food. And so since it's so applicable anywhere, there's like a lot of ways you can like help like with this goal. And I think some like examples are like Feed My Starving Children, like food drives, like food donations, and like there's like a ton of those like around like cities and towns, especially like big cities. Like big cities have like a ton of like those like organizations. So I think that like just like having like some sort of like fundraiser or like using or like donating money yourself to like buy food to go to those like food drives is just like really effective. And like it's kind of like a direct impact because like that food isn't going anywhere except to those like people in need.
Yeah, I think like Juby, you said like food is so important. I think since food is so important, I think it's probably one of the easiest ways to volunteer because like you're right, cities have food banks, like we have Chicago Food Bank, and Feed My Starving Children is really popular. And also, even if like Juby mentioned raising money, like we just went around and sold cookies. We raised money and we ended up donating it towards the food goal. However, if you use food to raise money, you can like donate it to any goal you want.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think one of the themes we're seeing is a lot of like big city action. So I think another great way to volunteer is to remember that it doesn't have to be like a full-time job type thing. And it doesn't have to be like you go to like this remote part of like the country to like volunteer. You can just go to the big city, like go to the beach or something and like spend like an afternoon volunteering and maybe go out for dinner. Like there's so many ways to incorporate volunteering into your day and like still, do other things. So it's not really like as much of a hindrance to your day. And there's so many ways to, like you can do it with friends, there's ways to do it with others. And in terms of what Juby said about goal 2, zero hunger, I think that also kind of relates to like what we were doing before with like selling the cookies and fundraising for kids as well. Like there's a lot of ways to integrate many parts um of volunteering with many UN goals. You don't just have to focus on one. Like for instance, how we combine like a few UN goals when we were doing like the reuse and sustainability month of our like for the world.
Yeah, I think like what you said about incorporating volunteering into like your daily life is a really good idea, especially if you find something that you're passionate about. Like my favorite goal is quality education too. And I think for me, it's because I'm able to give back to a community that helped me when I was younger through education. So I think that's a really good way to volunteer.
I think another important thing that a lot of people like overlook is that they think for your volunteering to be meaningful, it has to be like super extravagant or whatnot. And I think that that's honestly not what volunteering is about. A lot of people think, oh, I should be going to the places that quote unquote need it the most because they have higher poverty rates. Even if you're in a community that may not have like crazy high poverty rates or whatever your community might be, there's always going to be people who need help. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you're helping 10 people at your home or 10 people somewhere outside, you're still helping people regardless. So I think that it's just important to think about the work that you're doing rather than focusing on rather like the overall outcome of like where it's going, because I think that obviously it's important to make sure that what you're doing is going towards the right cause and that it's not just being misused. But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you're helping, especially if it's something where you're interacting with people. Like for me, I really like the third goal, which is like good health and well-being. So like, for example, hospitals and volunteering at places like that is a great example. So it's just important to remember, no matter where you go, you're still making a difference.
And since volunteering is all about helping people, I'm going to change the focus a little bit. So we know this is a For the World 1-year anniversary. So why did you guys join For the World? Why are you leading For the World? And why are you still here? What makes you stay?
I can start. So for me, I joined For the World. It was partly like as a way to get in a lot of volunteer hours, I'll admit, but it's also like the concept of it was like pretty unique of like being able to not just focus on volunteering for one specific like goal or like in one specific place, but being able to impact all the UN goals and like being able to make an impact everywhere. And I think honestly, like even though I didn't really envision this from the start, like it has really opened my eyes to a lot of other avenues of volunteering as well. Like I used to also think that like, it's always like the bigger organizations like Feed My Starving Children or stuff like that where you volunteer. But like I realized by like being in this role for like a year how many like niche smaller opportunities there are to volunteer in smaller groups that impact, kind of like Sia said earlier, just your local community and your local area. Like you don't really have to make this global impact as long as you're helping someone and you're helping your community. And I think that's why I'm like still here a year later. Like I'm still learning all these different avenues of like how you can volunteer, how you can impact others, how you can really like have this greater impact on the entire world. And like just from starting from your community and learning all the different avenues of like helping with all the UN goals and like finding different ways to combine them and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think
Oh, you go to me. You go.
okay, yeah, sure. The reason I joined was because Karina was like, I'm making this grill, you should join. And I was like, okay, sounds good. And also because like she said it was like a nonprofit. I was like, oh wow, that sounds cool. I wonder like what I could do with it, you know? And like I've never been in like a small like student run nonprofit before, so I was kind of like curious. So I was like, how can I like do something? So I joined because of that, and also mainly because it's like volunteering, but it's like flexible, right? Because it's not like a club like what's a volunteering club? It's not like Rotary Club, no, Key Club. It's not like Key Club where it's like you have to meet every Wednesday at like 3 to like 4:30, and like you have to do like this much stuff, like you have to do this exact like assignment or like project, whatever. And also it's like there's always gonna be what is it? Like a board. It's very structured, right? And like structure isn't necessarily a bad thing, but like sometimes you want that flexibility where you can just be like, let's try this, let's be a bit experimental. And like I like that kind of like freedom. So that's why I like joined and like that's why I keep staying. And also like the wide variety of volunteering that you can do is also nice. So that's why I like this organization.
For me, I'd say I honestly didn't really hear about this when you really first started off. I heard about it a little bit after. I honestly think it was probably like Grace's Instagram or something that like reposted it, and I probably found it from there because I honestly didn't really know anyone else that well. Like I knew Juby like very briefly, but we weren't super close or anything. And I think it was just something that really sparked my interest because I figured out that you guys were starting a podcast. And during COVID, especially, I started listening to podcasts. So I was like, I always wanted to start one about like something that could really help others. And I was like, volunteering, perfect, and like different goals to talk about. So that just makes it a little easier to have different types of conversations. Because another thing that can be really hard is just being very diverse with your topics that you talk about, because that can get really redundant on a podcast. So the podcast was really what sparked my interest. And then I saw that you guys had a couple posts or like reels, I think by then, of like some of the fun stuff that you guys were doing. And I was like, this seems really cool. And it was a really good experience for me because we've done some events together and like been to a couple of places or like volunteered, however it may be online or in person. And I think it's just been really nice to get like a little break in my day. And it's also a smaller community right now. It's just like us. And I think it's been really nice to get to know like the people in this tight knit circle and be able to do things with people who are like minded.
I joined because Karina asked me, but also because I had nothing to do really, and I was like, I probably should do something to help other people instead of just sitting around watching YouTube all day. But I think it made me see more about volunteering than putting food in bags because previously I'd only ever been to the more obvious ones like Feed My Starving Children. But now I've seen more about volunteering and what else it could be other than the most like basic first step.
Yay, okay. That actually made me really happy you guys found that. But anyways, I started For the World because I was thinking like, oh, I wanted to provide like easy ways that people can volunteer. And then I wanted to do a podcast just like for knowledge reasons, like to like inform people about stuff. And I chose the UN goals because I know that's like a global thing and there's a bunch of different ways you can make impact. But one of my I don't know, one of the events we did that had like the most impact on me that was like, oh, that's like why I stay, is Sadvi was kind of talking about how we do things like just within our community. And I remember once we went out and bought groceries at Aldi and then donated them to a homeless shelter. And I remember like bringing the groceries to the homeless shelter, and it was like this really like small secluded place. And it didn't seem like they had very much. So when I went there and like gave them their groceries, I was thinking like, oh, I really am making an impact. So I guess that's the reason I stay because there's so many like I guess somebody mentioned this earlier, like niche parts of the community that we can be helping. And I think it's important that we make an impact, even if it's just for like a few people. So that's why I stay. But yeah, I think that's the end of the podcast is mini episodes. I hope everybody enjoyed. Does anybody have any other comments? Anything they'd like to add? No?
Thank you all for following along.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.